This is the Perspective Chasing podcast, and I'm your host, John. On this episode, I want to talk about time to change. As always, building on previous episodes, and as always, this is only my experience and my opinions. But let's get into it. Look, I've been around enough people by this point to know that everyone will have a time in their life where it's time to change. And it can be in any aspect of life. It can be in work, home, personal life, whatever it is. But it will get to a point where if you don't take action, life will. And like I said, I've seen this happen time and time again to many people, myself included. And it's one of those ones where you can only put off a decision or an action for so long before, no matter what, it will come to pass. So I'll give you an example from my mum. So my mum, bless her, she was on a lot of medication towards her later years. Obviously she had many, many problems, bless her. But regardless, they had their side effects. One of the side effects was drowsiness. So during her driving, she would fall asleep at the wheel sometimes and drift off, or if she was sitting at the light, she'd fall asleep. And no matter how many times you'd be like, "Mum, wake up, like you're falling asleep, like pay attention, she would deny ever doing it. Now this went on for a while. She got into a few minor bumps and things like that, and I kind of had a sit down talk with her and said, "Look, Mum, like if you don't take some time and let your medicine work and kind of take a break from driving, the decision will be taken out of your hands." And it wasn't me saying that I would do anything malicious or anything, but like I said at the beginning of this, life has its way of but things come in full circle regardless. So inaction really doesn't lead to better results. It doesn't mean that the consequences are never going to come. So for my mum, because she never took the break from driving and she never come off of any of the medication or anything like that, eventually she got called to retest. Long story short, she failed the retest, and she was heartbroken that she was taken off the road, but because it was taken out of her hands, it was permanent. Like, the way for her to then get her license again, she'd have had to retest. Whereas if she would have voluntarily taken a break from driving, gotten her medication under control, she could have potentially gone on to drive for many more years. But it's almost a domino effect, because she ignored the problem for so long, somebody else noticed it and they didn't want to ignore the problem. So then they took action. Now, that's just a very clear-cut experience that I can share with you to kind of encompass what I mean when I say eventually the decision will be made for you. It doesn't have to mean that anybody's working maliciously against you. It doesn't have to mean the world's unfair, but things will play out regardless. Things are going to run their course. If you're cheating, eventually you're going to get caught. If you're being cheated on, eventually your heart's going to get broken. If you're stealing from work, eventually you're going to get caught and lose your job, and then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. If you're whatever you're doing, like, the consequences will come around. If you're neglecting your health, eventually you're going to have health issues. Those health issues you might find out about them overnight, but they didn't come about overnight. They've been in the background, just slowly being ignored over time and time again, and that problem grows. So it's time to change and stop ignoring those problems. It's time to be the person that you needed in the world. Like, so many of us hate the world that we live in, or hate such a strong word, but there's something we don't like about the world that we live in. But there's very little that a lot of people do to change. Don't get me wrong, there are some people that do everything they can to change the tide and push everything in another way. But it is an uphill battle. So the more people that can be flipped onto that side, the more people that are actively trying to change for the better and trying to make the world a better place, instead of just observing the negative and perpetuating the negative, it has to get to a point where it stops with you. Otherwise, it can just go on and on and on and on. So it's your life. Take control of it. It's time to change for the better. If those small changes start with us as individuals, eventually they domino forward. And that keeps dominoing. And I'm not saying that the world is going to be a utopia, this, that, and everything else. But it's fairly plain to see, for me anyway, that if we all try to be that little bit better, the whole world as a whole will get a little bit better. Now, I know that I live in a society where we're coming from a lot of privilege. Like, there's a lot of dark stuff going on in the world at the minute. And that's not going to change overnight. But it's also not going to change if we all just sit in that pity and dwell in the negativity. It's time to make changes with us, and then those changes pay on through life. Start making the ripples. It's time to say enough's enough. How many times are you going to make New Year's resolutions that you end up breaking come February, if that? Like, don't make temporary change. Make change forever. Change for the better. There's so much out there that we could all benefit from experiencing. There's so much life to lead. Don't get stuck in the unhappiness. Don't get stuck in a point where you don't know why you're doing it anymore. Like, everybody should be able to live their life with a certain amount of enthusiasm and a certain amount of vigor. Like, you should look forward to waking up the next day. But mainly because of how society is right now, a lot of people don't do that. There's so many people struggling mentally, and so many people just struggling with purpose and meaning, but really and truly nobody's going to come and give that to you. So it's down to you to make the changes and take control of your life. Make the changes that you want to see in the world in yourself, and slowly they'll pay forward. But first of all, you have to make the changes in yourself. Eventually you have to get to a point where it's make or break. And if you don't, life will make the decision for you. The universe will make it happen. And it won't be the result that you want. It won't be within your control. And you can't complain about it because you didn't do anything about it. So don't wait until it's too late. Do something about it before it gets too bad. Do something about it before you end up in the emergency room. Do something about it before your relationship's in the bin. Do something about it before your job's in the bin. Do something before it gets too late, before things are too bad to change. Because there is a time, and it might be uncomfortable, it might be an awkward conversation, it might be a heartbreaking conversation, it could be whatever it is, but unless you go through it, like, regardless, you're going to have to go through it anyway. We all have an arc through our lives where we have our own experiences, no matter what that may be. So your story has to play out, no matter what. Avoiding dealing with certain aspects of your story ain't going to change the story. It's just delaying the inevitable. So stop putting it off and start dealing with it. Start taking action and making the changes that you want in the world. At least then you can say you tried. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. The seed for this episode is stop letting yourself get away with it. Be the person that you want to see in the world. Stop blaming other people. Take full accountability. Is your life good or bad? Accept that and do something about it. If you want to see change in the world, if you're not happy with how things are, start making change. Stop being part of the problem and start being part of the solution. All the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.